What if the greatest dream a country ever had was also the seed of its worst nightmare? It sounds like a paradox, right? But in the 19th century, that's exactly what happened in America. There was this powerful, all-consuming idea to build a nation that stretched from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. But that very dream of a bigger, more unified country is exactly what pushed it into its bloodiest and most devastating war.
And by the 1850s, it looked like they had done it. This was the picture of total success. The United States had finally reached from coast to coast. It was this incredible moment of triumph, a nation looking at its brand new, complete map with a massive sense of pride and destiny.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How does this vision of a single, huge, unified country lead directly to a brutal, horrifying war that turned brother against brother? Well, that's what we're going to break down right now.
To really understand the storm that was brewing, we first have to get a handle on the idea that was driving everything. It was this powerful belief that drove America west, and it really felt less like a political plan and more like a force of nature.
That idea was called manifest destiny. And it's a kind of fancy term, but the idea is pretty simple. Manifest, as in it's obvious, destiny, as in it's meant to be. A lot of Americans truly believed it was their God-given right, even their duty, to spread the ideals of liberty and self-government all the way across the continent. This idea had some serious, unstoppable momentum.
And to get a sense of just how fast this all happened, you got to look at the before picture. Right after the Revolution, this was it. The United States just stopped at the Mississippi River. Everything west of that was foreign land.
And then, in just a few short decades, boom, the country explodes westward. You've got new tech like canals and railroads, a population that shot up by 300%, and by 1850, the U.S. border was the Pacific Ocean. I mean, the speed of this change was just staggering.
And if you want to know what it felt like to believe in this quote from John L. O'Sullivan, the guy who actually coined the phrase manifest destiny, just nails it. You can feel that sense of divine right, that feeling of we're supposed to do this, and the absolute certainty that it was for the good of everyone.
So, America is growing at this incredible breakneck speed. But here's the thing. This dream of a bigger nation was creating a huge and, it turns out, unsolvable problem. With every single square mile of new land, one question, a really toxic question, came right along with it.
And there it is. That was the question that was going to tear the country in two. As the U.S. got bigger, the balance of power between the free states in the North and the slave states in the South became the single most explosive issue in politics. Think of it like a seesaw, and every new territory threatened to tip that fragile balance and send the whole thing crashing down.
So politicians, of course, were scrambling to put a Band-Aid on this. The Compromise of 1850 was their biggest shot at it. They tried to give everybody something, right? California comes in as a free state, good for the North. New territories can decide on slavery for themselves, good for the South. But the real poison pill in this whole deal was that strict new fugitive slave law. It actually forced people in the North to help recapture escaped slaves, making them participants in an institution that many of them hated. It was a moral outrage.
And from there, things just spiraled. Every attempt to fix the problem just poured more gasoline on the fire. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act led to what's now known as Bleeding Kansas. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers rushed in to try and swing the vote, and it turned into a brutal, violent mini-civil war. The country was unraveling, and it was unraveling fast.
And then came the final straw. In 1857, the Supreme Court dropped a legal bombshell with the Dred Scott decision. It was devastating. The court basically said that black people, whether they were free or enslaved, could never be citizens and had no rights. It also said Congress had no power to stop slavery from spreading, and with that single ruling, the political middle ground just vanished. Any hope for compromise was dead.
Well, with compromise totally off the table, the argument moved from the halls of Congress to the battlefield. In 1861, the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter, and the Civil War had begun. Now, on paper, this looked like a completely one-sided fight. The Union in the North had way more people, way more factories, more railroads. Just look at that firearms number, a 32-to-1 advantage. The odds were just overwhelmingly stacked against the South.
And the strategies for each side really reflected that reality. The Union went with the Anaconda Plan. The idea was to basically squeeze the Confederacy to death by blockading its ports and taking control of the Mississippi River. The South's plan was simpler, an offensive defense, just protect your home turf, fight a defensive war, and make the conflict so long and so bloody that the North would eventually just get tired and give up.
Now, it's really important to remember that for the first couple of years, the war was just about one thing: preserving the Union. It wasn't about slavery. But then came the Battle of Antietam in 1862, the single bloodiest day in all of American history. And in the wake of all that horror, President Lincoln saw a political opening to give the war a new, higher moral purpose.
He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, it didn't immediately free all the slaves, only those in the states that were in rebellion. But its impact was absolutely huge. It totally transformed the war. It was no longer just about saving the country, it was now a revolutionary fight for freedom. It was a brilliant move, both strategically and morally. So after 4 long, brutal years, the war is over. The Union survived. But, sometimes winning the war is the easy part. Now came the unbelievably hard part. How on earth do you put a shattered, bitter, and completely changed nation back together again?
And right away, 2 totally different ideas emerged. You had the presidential plan, which was pretty lenient. The goal was just to get the southern states back in the Union as quickly as possible. Kind of like, let's just get back to normal. But Congress had a much stricter plan. They wanted to completely remake Southern society and, crucially, protect the rights of the 4 million people who were now free.
And in that political showdown, Congress won. They took control of the whole process, which became known as Reconstruction. They passed laws that divided the old Confederacy into 5 military districts, basically putting the South under federal control to enforce all these new rules and protect civil rights.
And this era gave us 3 of the most important changes to the Constitution in all of American history. I mean, they're revolutionary. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery, for good. The 14th says everyone born here is a citizen and has equal protection under the law. And the 15th says you can't stop someone from voting because of their race. This was a total rewrite of what freedom meant in America.
So after all of that, the expansion, the war, the rebuilding, what was the final outcome? Where did America end up?
Well, it's kind of a story with 2 different endings. On one hand, the Union was saved. All the southern states were back in, and the Constitution was changed forever to include these amazing promises of freedom and equality. But, and this is a huge but, the national will to actually enforce those promises just faded away. By 1877, the federal troops were pulled out of the South, the whole project of Reconstruction was basically over, and that promise of equality was left unfulfilled for almost another 100 years.
Which leaves us with this final, really tough question. The dream of a country from sea to shining sea accidentally sparked a war that ended slavery and wrote a new definition of freedom into the law. But it also left behind this bitter, unresolved struggle over what that freedom and equality actually look like in practice. A struggle that would continue to shape the nation for generations to come.